I let you think you won. The most dangerous position is believing you're in control. Opening. This is not a confession. I'm not here to explain myself. I'm not here to justify anything. I'm not here to correct your interpretation. I'm here to tell you exactly what happened. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my problem, because discomfort is what happens when certainty collapses. Chapter 1. Why winning is always announced too early. People love to believe they've won. They declare it. They feel it. They perform it. Winning feels like dominance, like superiority, like finality. But real power never announces itself. The people who rush to declare victory are almost always reacting to silence, not control. Silence creates a vacuum, and vacuums get filled with fantasy. Chapter 2. How you mistook my stillness for defeat. You thought I stopped responding because I was beaten. You thought I went quiet because I ran out of moves. You thought my restraint meant surrender. That assumption told me everything I needed to know, because only people who require resistance to feel powerful believe silence is defeat. Chapter 3. Why I didn't correct you. Here's the first disruption. I didn't correct you because correction would have helped you. Correction would have given you information. Clarification would have stabilized your confidence. Engagement would have kept the game alive. So I didn't. Not out of fear, not out of confusion, out of precision. Chapter 4. The most common misread in human dynamics. People think power looks loud. It doesn't. Power looks patient. It looks detached. It looks unbothered. The louder someone declares victory, the more they need confirmation. I didn't need confirmation. Chapter 5. Why I let you believe the story you wanted. Everyone believes a story about themselves. Some stories require opposition to exist. You needed me to push back so you could feel dominant. You needed friction so you could feel victorious. You needed engagement so you could feel important. So when I withdrew engagement, you filled in the blanks. You crowned yourself the winner. I let you. If you're serious about saving yourself, prove it now by taking a simple, symbolic, powerful step to subconsciously program hypermind and send a message to the universe. If you ignore this action, you'll be cursing yourself by clicking the subscribe button and liking this video. You're proving to yourself you're at the right place at the right time, and you're ready to reap the rewards. Let's fucking go. Chapter 6. What winning actually meant to you. Winning wasn't about me. It was about control, about narrative, about certainty. Winning meant you weren't questioned, you weren't exposed, you didn't have to reflect, you didn't have to adjust. Winning meant the system stayed intact, and I understood that very clearly. Chapter 7. The moment I realized you needed me more than I needed you. There's a moment in every dynamic where the balance reveals itself. It's not dramatic, it's not emotional, it's mathematical. Who reacts? Who escalates? Who needs the other person to respond? When I stopped feeding the system, you intensified. That wasn't power. That was dependence. Chapter 8. Why I didn't take the win away from you. I could have corrected the narrative. I could have said, that's not what's happening. You're misunderstanding. You don't have control. But that would have robbed you of the lesson. People only understand collapse when they walk into it themselves. So I stepped aside. Chapter 9. The difference between losing and letting go. Here's where most people get confused. I didn't lose. I let go. Loss implies struggle. Letting go implies choice. You can't beat someone who isn't playing, and you can't dominate someone who isn't participating. Chapter 10. Why you felt stronger when I stepped back. When resistance disappears, people feel inflated. They mistake absence for victory. They mistake compliance for submission. They mistake calm for defeat. Your confidence spiked because nothing challenged it. That confidence was hollow. Chapter 11. How false victory creates blind spots. The moment you believed you won, you stopped paying attention. You stopped reading the room. You stopped noticing shifts. You stopped questioning assumptions. Certainty dulls awareness, and awareness is where real power lives. Chapter 12. Why I didn't need to outplay you. Outplaying requires effort. Effort signals investment. I didn't need to outplay you because I wasn't competing. I removed myself from the equation. You played against an empty space. Chapter 13. The structure collapses when opposition leaves. Every system built on dominance requires opposition. Without opposition, control has no reference. Authority has no meaning. Victory has no witness. When I disengaged, the structure lost its anchor. You just didn't realize it yet. Chapter 14. Why your win had a timer on it. Here's the truth nobody tells you. False wins expire. They're fueled by momentum, not foundation. As soon as the applause ends, reality creeps back in, and reality doesn't care who you thought you beat. Chapter 15. What I was doing while you celebrated while you were certain, I was observing. While you were declaring, I was recalibrating. While you were reinforcing your narrative, I was stepping outside of it entirely. I wasn't plotting, I wasn't scheming, I was disengaging. Chapter 16. Why disengagement is always misunderstood. People hate disengagement because disengagement removes leverage. It gives no feedback, it offers no validation, it provides no mirror. So people project meaning onto it. They call it weakness, they call it defeat, they call it running away. They are wrong. Chapter 17. The moment you needed me to come back. Eventually something shifted. The certainty started to fade. The silence became uncomfortable. The absence felt heavier. That's when the outreach begins, the escalation, the testing. Not because you missed me, because the system needed me. Chapter 18. Why I didn't return. Returning would have restored balance. Returning would have made your win real. Returning would have given you closure. I didn't owe you that. Not out of spite, out of truth. Chapter 19. When winning starts to feel empty. There's a phase people don't talk about. After the celebration, after the certainty, when the adrenaline fades, that's when people ask, why doesn't this feel right? Because the opponent never showed up to lose. Chapter 20. The beginning of the real consequence. This is where the story turns. Not dramatically, not violently, not emotionally, structurally. Without opposition, the system begins consuming itself, and that has nothing to do with me. Part 1. End. The illusion is in place. By the end of this phase, one thing is true. You believe you've won, and I've already left the game. What comes next doesn't require my involvement. It only requires time. Chapter 21. The silence you didn't prepare for winning feels good, at first. But victory assumes something continues afterward. Conversation, reaction, resistance, validation. When none of that arrives, silence changes character. It stops feeling like peace. It starts feeling like exposure. Silence without opposition is not calm. It's destabilizing. Chapter 22. Why control requires a participant. Control is not self-sustaining. It requires attention, reaction, resistance, feedback. Remove any one of those and control weakens. Remove all of them and it collapses. You didn't lose control because I took it. You lost it because there was no one left to control. Chapter 23. The first crack in your certainty. At some point, confidence stops expanding. It stalls. Then questions appear, not spoken, but felt. Why isn't this landing? Why don't I feel different? Why isn't there relief? False victories don't resolve tension. They postpone it. Chapter 24. Why you started reaching out again. This is where people lie to themselves. They say it's about closure. They say it's about fairness. They say it's about conversation. It's not. It's about restoring equilibrium. Silence removed your reference point. You needed me back in position. Chapter 25. The Testing Phase. The first messages aren't aggressive. They're neutral, casual, innocent, a probe, a way to see if the system still responds. When it doesn't, escalation begins. Chapter 26. Why escalation is inevitable. Escalation isn't cruelty. It's desperation dressed as confidence. When light pressure fails, force is applied. When force fails, emotion appears. When emotion fails, accusation returns. Not because you're malicious, because the system demands reaction. Chapter 27. What you misunderstood about my absence. You assumed absence meant loss. It didn't. It meant completion. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't strategizing. I wasn't watching closely. I was gone. And that's the one position you didn't account for. Chapter 28. The moment you realized you had no move left. There's a specific moment. It arrives quietly. When you realize, nothing provokes response, nothing restores leverage, nothing restarts the dynamic, no counterplay, no escalation, no reversal. That's when the illusion finally cracks. Chapter 29. Why you felt angry without a target. Anger needs direction. Without a target, it turns inward. That's uncomfortable. That's destabilizing. That's unfamiliar. So it looks for somewhere else to go. And without access to me, it has nowhere obvious. Chapter 30. The difference between being ignored and being removed. Being ignored is temporary. Being removed is final. Ignored means not right now. Removed means not again. The body recognizes the difference before the mind does. Chapter 31. Why you started rewriting the story. When outcomes don't match expectations, stories change. You adjust the narrative to protect certainty. You reinterpret events. You reassign motives. You redefine roles. Not to deceive others, to stabilize yourself. Chapter 32. Why that didn't work. Narratives only work when they're reinforced. They need witnesses. They need interaction. They need confirmation. Without engagement, stories echo back hollow. You can't convince silence of anything. Chapter 33. The Panic Phase. Unspoken but real. This is the phase people never admit. When control doesn't return. When certainty erodes. When confidence deflates. It's not visible panic. It's structural panic. Disorientation, agitation, urgency without direction. Chapter 34. Why you thought I was doing this to you when consequences arrive without confrontation, intent is assumed. You thought, this is deliberate. This is calculated. This is punishment. It wasn't. It was absence meeting dependency. Chapter 35. The moment you needed me to confirm your winning requires acknowledgement. Without acknowledgement, victory feels unfinished. You wanted a reaction, a concession, a visible loss. You didn't get one. So the win never settled. Chapter 36. Why I never disputed your claim. I didn't correct you when you said you won. Not because you were right, because disputing it would have made it relevant. I didn't need to win. I needed to exit. Chapter 37. The structure starts turning inward. Systems built on external reference fail internally, without opposition. Self-regulation is required. Accountability emerges. Internal contradictions surface. This is when things feel like they're falling apart. They're not. They're being exposed. Chapter 38. Why this feels like betrayal. When someone leaves a role you relied on, it feels personal, even if no promise was broken, even if no rule was violated. Dependence disguises itself as entitlement, and entitlement resents removal. Chapter 39. The moment control became a liability. Control feels powerful until it has nowhere to land. Then it becomes weight. You don't know where to direct it. You don't know how to use it. You don't know who you are without it. That's when control turns against its owner. Chapter 40. The final misread. You still thought this was about you, about winning, about losing, about dominance. It wasn't. It was about structure, and the structure no longer included me. Chapter 41. Why you felt smaller after winning. This is the part nobody prepares you for. Winning didn't expand you, it shrank you, because power without opposition collapses inward, and silence doesn't validate ego. Chapter 42. The difference between power and position. You had position, I had freedom. Position requires defense, freedom doesn't. When position collapses, it leaves nothing behind. When freedom expands, it doesn't need permission. Chapter 43. Why I never looked back. Looking back re-enters the field. It restores relevance. It revives tension. It gives meaning to what already ended. I didn't look back. Not to hurt you. To stay gone. Chapter 44. When you realized the game ended without you. The worst realization isn't losing. It's discovering the game ended without your awareness. No referee, no announcement, no rematch. Just absence. Part 2. End. The collapse has begun. By the end of this phase, one truth exists. You didn't lose to me. You lost to the fact that I was no longer there, and what comes next is unavoidable. Chapter 45. When there is nothing left to react to. At some point, reaction runs out. Not because emotions are resolved, not because understanding arrives, but because there is nothing left to engage with. No resistance, no friction, no confirmation, just silence that doesn't respond to pressure. Chapter 46. Why silence becomes louder than conflict. Conflict distracts. It creates movement. It creates purpose. It creates the illusion of progress. Silence offers none of that. Silence reflects everything back, unfiltered. Chapter 47. The moment you realized I wasn't coming back. This realization doesn't arrive dramatically. It arrives in fragments. A message unanswered. A door never reopened. A timeline that never reconnects. Not blocked, not argued, not debated. Just closed. Chapter 48. Why you felt small without anyone trying to make you feel that way. No one diminished you. No one attacked you. No one challenged you. And yet, something shrank, because power that depends on reaction cannot survive independence. Chapter 49. The myth of winning without witnesses. Winning requires an audience. Someone to see it, someone to acknowledge it, someone to concede. Without witnesses, victory becomes internal fantasy, and fantasy collapses under scrutiny. Chapter 50. Why you couldn't move on cleanly. People assume moving on is emotional. It's not. It's structural. You couldn't move on because the system never completed its loop. No resolution, no submission, no closure, just absence. Chapter 51. How identity collapses without opposition. Identity formed through dominance requires opposition to define itself. Without an opponent, confidence loses shape, certainty dissolves, superiority has no reference. You weren't facing loss, you were facing irrelevance. Chapter 52. Why you kept replaying the end. People replay endings when they didn't control them. You kept revisiting moments. What you said, what I didn't say, what you expected next. Repetition is the mind's attempt to restore agency. It didn't work. Chapter 53. Why I never corrected the final version of you. I never stepped in to clarify, not because I agreed, because clarification would have reinserted me into the narrative. I was already gone. Chapter 54. The difference between being left and being released. Being left implies rejection. Being released implies autonomy. I didn't abandon you. I exited the structure. There's a difference. Chapter 55. Why the aftermath felt unfair. Fairness requires comparison. Comparison requires proximity. Without proximity, fairness becomes irrelevant. What you experienced wasn't unfairness. It was consequence without negotiation. Chapter 56. The final attempt to restore control. There is always one last attempt. A final message, a final story, a final justification, not to reconnect, to stabilize the self-image. It didn't land. Chapter 57. Why I never took the bait only works on participants. I wasn't one anymore. There was nothing to win, nothing to prove, nothing to reclaim. Chapter 58. When you realized this wasn't revenge, this realization is uncomfortable, because revenge implies intent, and intent implies relevance. This wasn't revenge. This was absence doing what absence does. Chapter 59. The moment you understood you needed me more than I needed you. This is the quietest realization, and the heaviest. It doesn't announce itself. It settles. Chapter 60. Why this felt like loss. Even though you won, because the thing you needed wasn't victory, it was engagement, and engagement was gone. Chapter 61. What I was doing while you were processing. I wasn't thinking about you. I wasn't replaying events. I wasn't tracking outcomes. I was rebuilding a life that didn't require reaction to function. Chapter 62. The strange calm that followed. Calm arrived without effort. Not happiness, not excitement, stability, the kind that doesn't spike or crash, the kind that doesn't need confirmation. Chapter 63. Why I never felt the need to explain. Explanation is only necessary when permission is required. I wasn't asking for permission. I was leaving. Chapter 64. The final shift in power. Power didn't transfer. It dissolved, because power that exists only in relation disappears when the relation ends. Chapter 65. Why this story makes people uncomfortable because it removes villains, because it removes heroes, because it removes justification. It leaves structure exposed. Chapter 66. What this means for anyone listening. If this story resonates, it's not because of me. It's because you recognize the pattern. Patterns don't accuse. They repeat. Chapter 67. The last misconception. You thought I stayed silent to hurt you. I stayed silent because there was nothing left to say. Chapter 68. Why I never took credit. Credit implies competition. I wasn't competing. I was exiting. Chapter 69. The end of the game. Games end when players leave, not when someone wins. Chapter 70. The final truth. I didn't beat you. I didn't outplay you. I didn't defeat you. I let you think you won. And then I left. Closing. No moral, no warning. This story offers no lesson, only a reality. When someone believes they've won, they stop paying attention. And sometimes that's when everything quietly ends.